If you're good at storytelling, then you're good at stakeholder management. What you're saying is a type of joke that's called push the logic. It's the type of joke saying, my grandpa died peacefully in his sleep, unlike the rest of. So then the same way that now you want to hire a Gen Z to do your TikTok, in the same way you will have an intern that is strong AI plus craft. When you have a company context, one of the best things you can do is to upskill people in the craft that they have, in how to combine that craft with AI.
Hey, hello, and welcome to today's episode with the guest being the host of Yet Another Expat podcast. He's a current and maybe former, I'm actually not sure if you still do science stand-up comedy. He studied software engineering, turned expert, and at this point, I'd say veteran in people and culture. They renamed it to Only People at a company called Pleo. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. Hi, Seb, or Bastian, or Sebastian. Hi, everyone who's listening. Thanks for joining, and hope you get something cool from today's conversation. I'm very excited for everything Seb has lined up for you and me.
Perfectly for what's lined up and why I think people should listen. And to be honest, the things that I want to learn and why I invited you is I hope I'm the best listener of your podcast. Yet Another Expat. I'll try to plug it as many times as I can. Because I really admire your skill of, it's a one-man show. You summarize things that happen in a week, both the news and to yourself. And I think your ability for storytelling is very impressive, and I would like to be there. There's a reason why I interview people and I'm not the main person in the podcast, because I don't have that skill. And then secondly, well, this is a podcast partially as well about career, and you work in what's called people. I think back in days, HR, for people who might not directly get the link. And for the ones, I think this is the reason why people should stay until the end of the podcast, because you're now focusing on AI specifically in the people team, but I guess also for the company as a whole.
Yeah, not for the company as a whole yet. The interesting thing is, okay, I'll just jump right into this. It seems that everyone is looking into AI today. So maybe someone listening is like, oh no, oh my God, yet another person that will talk to us about AI. But I promise I have some very interesting practical things that will make life better. And I think that should be the main purpose of AI: make life better, make boring things less boring, like make manual tasks automated, give back time, and do the things that matter, especially in a people team. You want to have the human touch. You want your time to be able to really create value for your people. So if you're caught up all day doing operational things and creating the same types of documents or answering the same types of questions, it can also feel a little bit daunting. There is a lot of value and power in actually enabling to have the human moments. And it's a little bit like a paradox, because actually, if you bring AI, if you bring the systems, you can make things even more human from the bandwidth you release to the teams to actually do the more nice things. That's the one thing on a high level. The second one about AI in the entire company. I think a lot of companies now are bringing AI in these pockets. So I'm looking into AI for the people team. There's someone else looking for AI into maybe enablement or some internal departments. And we see now the need for all this leads that look into AI in maybe one vertical or one and a half, or a subset of the company, to come together in the same place and hold the conversation. Because from a strategy standpoint, there are so many new things coming up that if we are not organized on a company level on what makes sense and what are the overlaps between the things we're doing, we could be just making too much noise without a lot of value. So this is about the role. And then I'll just, I'll stop here. Please free to stop me. It's the person inside of me that can't stop talking. So
that's why you have a great podcast, which is you just telling great stories. I actually remember there's one episode of yours where you literally spent 20 minutes just explaining the whole story of you being at the airport at London. Something happens in Gatwick Airport, all the way South London. You get stuck. You have to go all the way North London for the next flight. And somehow you can create a whole story out of it, which I can't. You also have great pieces of news in your podcast about the AI wars, when China came with DeepSeek and just blew away everything else. But maybe just a bit more to test as well your own knowledge of what your podcast has been about. And also, there's some unsolved questions that you actually started in your podcast. And to introduce people to your podcast and what can be included in it, I have 3 little questions for you.
That's lovely. That feels so good. Okay.
The first one, I think, especially, at least everyone will need this knowledge at least at one point in their life, I hope. So you mentioned at this point you have a book on baby poop, and you mentioned it tells you which colors are good, which are bad. I would just wonder if you can enlighten us on from the best to worst color. At which one are we like, my baby is healthy? At which point is our baby dying?
Oh boy. Well, first of all, I have to say that this book / leaflet, it was given by like the German government, like from the healthcare system. It's an official book of color poop. So I've bought a few books. This one was one that was given to us. It depends on the stage of the baby, but basically, yeah, yellowish, brownish, all these things are good. If it starts turning green, Seb, if it starts turning green, then you need to investigate. There are different shades of green. Green can happen, but it's the one where it needs some investigation. So I would say this is the color. And then since we got there, that's a deep dive. My girlfriend tells me to never talk about poop. She says I talk about poop too often. But the truth is, because I'm a dad, I became a dad this year. The baby's now 8 months old. But the beginning of the first child is so stressful because you know nothing. And it's this little thing you need to keep alive. And you have zero feedback, no feedback loop. It doesn't talk. It doesn't, like, you really don't know if things are going well. And the only thing you have to know if things are going well is actually the poop. So it's a weird thing that you need to dive into if you're interested in decoding that black box. And that's just the beginning. After that, you get more signals back and it gets easier. But at that stage, I was, very interested in getting information. And the reality is that poop is what could give that to me. So if you see green
poop.
You see green, take a photo and send it to ChatGPT. It won't be the first time it gets that question asked.
All right. You also mentioned there's a lot of different colors of noises. I think a lot of people have heard of white noise. You mentioned, I think, pink noise, brown noise. Which noise is your favorite noise to work? We need to focus on work.
Well, I hate white noise now because we use it all the time for the baby. So it's like the baby has exclusivity over the white noise. I'm not entirely sure. They do say that brown and pink are better for like concentration and white is better for sleep, but I really don't know if it's a marketing scheme. So I would say that when I'm working, I actually sometimes just listen to music that has no lyrics. And the BPM has to do with how many things I feel like I have to do. And then for sleeping, I actually also sleep and listening to podcasts now. And I know
I can't do that.
That's a weird thing. Some people take offense if you say, "Oh, I love your podcast. I put it when I go to sleep." For me, it's a lovely thing because the brain stops thinking. So depends on the podcast, but the brain gets into this. I don't need to be in the driver's seat now. Someone else is doing the driving. I'm just creating the visuals and taking the ride, and I find this relaxing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I actually love listening to podcasts whilst biking, and I zone out and I zone in when I feel like it's important. Okay, last question and fun fact from your podcast. Also, I feel like I only picked the bit more ridiculous facts out of your podcast, but there's also a lot of good stuff coming out of your podcasts, and a lot of important news. Like you talk a lot about
Is this
AI
going
and
to be about
DeepSeek
a
and other
garlic
things.
press?
Oh no, but the
Okay.
garlic press, apparently worst invention ever. This is more like a hypothetical. So you live in Berlin. Imagine the whole world runs out of drugs, including alcohol. Which fish would you recommend that the raver scene, the techno scene people use, or which fish do you think high school students would pass around in the schoolyard to get high?
Oh, that's a fun one. Okay. Well, that's definitely the pufferfish because,
Yeah,
okay, you're bringing such a cool, fun fact. This is something about the podcast. If you listen to it, you will have a few things to say at a party. Maybe not much more, but the pufferfish apparently is toxic. But if you're a smart mammal like dolphins, you can get a puff out of the pufferfish without being like too toxic. You don't die. You just get a high. So there are dolphins that get high by passing on, like by playing with the pufferfish, and they've even, because they're social animals, they even pass the pufferfish around. So it really feels like something you could see in our society as well.
yeah, yeah. Your podcast is honestly a lot is full of fun facts.
It's
Before we
full of
dive,
things that you say, is that really true? I need to Google it, and then you
to be honest,
Google
yeah,
it.
that sometimes I'm like, you should be like Armchair Experts is a great podcast, and they always have a fact check at the end. Um, Before we dive into your podcast, or kind of maybe going over there slowly, something that I really admire about your podcast, which comes out once a week. It's roughly 20-minute episodes. And you also, I mean, you did science stand-up comedy. I had a Greek friend of mine, for people who haven't figured out your accent by now, you're Greek. But something that I really admire about, and where I think you must be really good, and I wonder if it comes natural or if you had a way of training it, which we then as well can apply ourselves, is you seem to be very aware of your surrounding at all times. And I think your podcast shows that in many different ways. And I have two examples of them. You make fun of a phone repair shop, which is called Next Phone, which doesn't make sense because you don't want the next phone, you want your current phone. You also make fun of a chicken shop called City Chicken, which, if you read it quickly or someone pronounces it quickly, sounds like shitty chicken. Your podcast is a lot, again, a bit more context for listeners, is random pieces of news in the media, in the news, and stories from your own life. How do you have this constant awareness about what's going around on around you in the world, and also in your own perception?
That is actually a great question. So what I think is happening, I started loving stand-up comedy when I was young. I don't remember when, but it was definitely, not definitely, it was probably through downloading things that maybe I shouldn't be downloading. The torrent era, that was a good era. But
Yeah.
I got to enter the stand-up comedy world by consuming as much as I could, as much as it was out there. The reason why I bought Netflix when it became available was just to be able to see some comedy specials without feeling the guilt of using Pirate Bay or something like this, allegedly. And I think that when you start entering this world of observational comedy, I would call it, you start listening to these stories, whether it is from me, I listen from someone else. There are great comedians out there that do observational comedy. Something slowly awakens inside of you. It's a weird thing. And then the interesting part is that need you can keep it active if you want, or it becomes dormant. I find myself at times realizing that I'm not observing the world around me, and somehow I can actively remind myself to be a bit more observant. It's a little bit connected with having a phone all the time and earbuds all the time and all of this new way that some people experience like life
Do you have a
outside.
phone and earbuds in all the time, or do you exactly not do that?
I find it's a struggle. it's a constant fight. So it's 50-50, but a big part of me would like to just indulge myself in earpods and other content and just be a content consuming thing. But there is content around you. So this is the debate I have inside of me. There's a lot of content around, so it's a little bit more interesting. But what I want to say with this is I started doing some stand-up comedy in the sense of going to open mics. Anyone can go to an open mic. You can write 5 minutes of jokes, and then probably it's not going to be nice, but it's something you can do. And once you start being in this mode, somehow your brain looks at the world and makes silly thoughts. People around you might not like it because you make stupid jokes very often, but it's almost like a mini AI trying things out, and a lot of things need to fail for other things to be better. So I don't know how to explain it, but I can say that I find myself at times not being so aware and remind myself that there's a lot of beauty in observing, no matter whether there is an audience to hear about it in the podcast or it's just me feeling my brain work and entertain
Yeah.
itself. It's not always on. That's the short answer.
Okay, so you're saying it comes from observational stand-up comedy. So you constantly need to
That's what
be aware
sparks
of
it.
things to create.
That's what creates the neural pathway that looking at the world through this lens is possible and also interesting, or it can be fun. I think for me, listening to a lot of comedy with storytellers that bring things from their life and observational comedy kind of created this neural pathway of like storytelling or observing the absurdity in something small and making a story out of it. And then it kind of, I tried to do it on its own, or
Yeah.
this is the only way I can describe it, because it wasn't always there. And then it started being there because I liked it. And then expression is great. So I found a way to try and do stand-up comedy or write in a blog or whatever it is. Some people tell stories to their friends, but it's like this expressive side that needs some material. And I think everyone can do it.
So you mentioned you start going to open mics, and I can imagine not everyone either wants to pursue this, but I think everyone probably wants to or should become better at expressing themselves. Telling stories is most likely one of the most important skills in life, right? How did you maintain this before? Your podcast is a year and a bit old now. Did you do stand-up comedy all the way through? Because my question is, how did you maintain this whilst not doing either podcasting or stand-up comedy? Is it, as you mentioned, just making all the jokes that you can think of to your friends, the ones you feel comfortable with, and then try to get feedback there, and then also learning how to fail? Because, not every joke will hit.
Yeah. Well, I'll start off by saying that I very much agree that storytelling is one of the greatest things we have in life. If you imagine people sitting in a fire thousands of years ago, there would be stories. It passes things to generations. It makes points. Sometimes you can make a story or a joke and make a point come across much better than having a direct confronting conversation. I really think the storytelling is fun and cool, because if you can bring something to the other person they didn't know, there's a great joy in that. And it goes from whatever work you do. If you're good at storytelling, then you're good at stakeholder management and being able to convey your points across in a business in the right way. And you're able to, I don't know, I just find it a very interesting skill, not to succeed, but also to be understood in life. So
Yeah.
this might stem from me being a middle child and always wanting to have more audience than what was available, maybe. But to try and answer the question, I remember I used to write a lot as a child. I don't know if that would have happened if phones had been around. So I'm grateful for that. But I was writing a lot when I was 13, 14. It was the time of blogs. The internet was not so big.
Yeah.
The internet lived in these tiny pockets of forums, of blogs. Social media was not a thing. So I was writing at this blog that to me felt like a diary, and I was just saying whatever. And that went all the way until I was 18 or 19. And then I got into uni and I was very excited about technology. I was very excited about all the cool things that technology can do. I remember the first thing was, and I was consuming a lot of comedy. I was in my university library where I saw a poster that said, "Can you explain science in under 3 minutes in an engaging way? Sign up here." And I was like, whoa, this is exactly what I want. I'll go to this thing. I don't know what it is. It's called FameLab. It's a competition for science communication. It's international, and they do it a lot in unis. And I just went up there and I talked about Bitcoin and I got into the finals. And then one person from the crowd came to me and said, I don't know if you're going to the finals. I think you should, but I have a team that does comedy and science. And I think you would be a great fit for it. And my head was exploding. I was like, comedy and science? You do both? Oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I will join your team. So I joined this weird team of scientists trying to do stand up for multiple years that gave me a place where I could try and go and make jokes. But the problem is, this is a long answer, but I'm getting to it, that my thing had always to do with science. So whatever comedy I brought, it had to be about the robots asking us to prove we are humans by selecting the street lights, and I was making jokes that the Greeks don't even know how to see an actual stop sign because they drive like maniacs. Whatever it was, I always had to try and bring science into it, which was nice, but a bit limiting. And I had all these other things that were popping in my head that were more inappropriate, or I couldn't pair them with science. And I thought I need to find a place to say all the other stuff because they're not science enough, but they are still in my notes. And this is how the open mic started. It was just an attempt to bring all the worst things. Um, the way things stayed alive, I think I always tried to do at least a few open mics a year, even if I had no practice. When I moved to Berlin, I knew no one. There was no team here. I couldn't do anything. But in every place in the world now, there is open mic. There are big groups. You can't just sign up and get a spot a few weeks later. So I just gave it a go, and I, yeah, it was kept alive. The thought for a podcast was always there, but I didn't know the format. I didn't know if it's going to be interviews. I didn't know if it's going to be more science. And then when I started doing it, I realized that the most important thing for me is to keep it going. And in order to do that, it's easier if I am as natural as it gets. And that's how this weird format of what's happening in my life, plus the news I read that are interesting, plus a few things I saw around that are interesting to share, observational, social stuff, came to be. And it's a weird format, but it gives me the feeling of expressing enough so I don't have this tingling sensation that I'm not putting my thoughts somewhere.
To be honest, I don't think it's a weird format at all, especially with today's attention economy where we crave constant dopamine hits. Our attention span is not even 30 seconds. We have way too many of those reels where they talk about something, but the video of the reel is not even about or is not even related to the actual information. It's just
Minecraft.
yeah, it's Minecraft or random stuff that just satisfies your eyes. And what I actually really appreciate about your podcast is, well, either it's one big story, like the airport story, which somehow filled 20 minutes, where I'm like, how did you do that and make that entertaining? Because I would never be able to do that. I shouldn't say never. I should practice to get there. Attitude matters. But sometimes also, yeah, you switch a lot and there's just a lot of different topics and you switch so smoothly. And then part of that is, well, what I would like to learn myself, where I wonder if that's just years of practice, as you said, and then it just brain somehow makes the connections. Sometimes you come with really nice wordings. I had one written down somewhere, missing that right now. But also you come with great examples, like with a pufferfish story. You said something along the lines of the dolphins pass around the pufferfish like high school students in the schoolyard, just making the relationship of passing around a joint or a cigarette or whatever. Does that at some point come natural and do you just find your own niche or way of communicating? Or is that something you also practice and you know that people can easily relate to examples? Or how did you get to that point?
I think I'm a very visual person. So when I think about something, the visual part is mostly what I almost see, and then I try to describe it with words. It's definitely useful to join the Reddit community Ellie5, explain like I'm 5. It's a Reddit community where people ask something and then say, hey, please break it down to me. And I did this for science communication because if you're a great communicator, you can explain something, the same thing, to a 5-year-old, and to a 12-year-old and to an 18-year-old and to a 60. Like there's this challenge to try and explain the same thing.
Are there specific concepts when it comes to explaining something? Like in your podcast, you use examples a lot or references.
It all comes from internal need. But for me, explaining something, there is what's the main thing I want this person to know? If you were to not pay attention, if there was just one thing you keep out of this, what is this one thing I want you to keep? And usually a story, even if it is long, it will have at least three main things, or it will have a few main things that I would like the listener to get. Whether it is the knowledge bit that at the end of the day, yes, dolphins pass around the pufferfish like a joint. If it was, I don't know, a Vice article title, I mean, Vice is a little bit more provocative, but if you could try and make it into a title, what would it be? And once I have that, it feels a bit like the make sure I don't miss these 3 points, and the rest I can fill in with my words or my improv, but I need to remember to try and put the attention on these 3 points. So
Is
this
that
is
something you do before you go to an open mic or when you prepare for your podcast episodes? Is that exactly the steps you do? Is like, what would the title of this story be and what would be the three main points? Is that how you prepare, or are there different steps in between that we're missing?
I was struggling so much to learn how to prepare for podcasts because no one says how they do it, or I couldn't find the podcasts I like. They never said what their methodology is. What I ended up doing was very close to that. So I have my notes on my phone are on the second screen, so I can write, and then immediately write something. And when I write something, have you ever had this thing where you write some notes and then you see them a week later and you have no idea what it was about? Like you don't
Yeah.
remember the feeling, you don't remember the emotion, you don't remember, like somehow the peaks are missing. So I've had that in the past. So now I try when I write something down to identify what's my main emotion: surprise, anger, confusion. Like when I think about this, how does the voice inside of me sound like? Because the future me might forget, and then if you try to convey something, but the original emotion is missing, it doesn't really work so well. So I try to remember by doing something bold or by saying like writing the emotion. And then what are the most interesting parts about it? Um, so I think I imagine myself talking about it to a friend. Like the thing with the phone, where you said that the shop's name was Next Phone. I literally have a few friends that I speak very freely with, and I would imagine myself like complaining to them and be like, what the fuck? They've named it like this. This makes no sense because blah, blah, blah. And through that imaginary conversation in my head, I can pinpoint the best bits, if you call it like that. So the podcast is titles and bullet points. For an open mic, I actually write the entire text, which is not great. But if you want to do stand-up comedy, you cannot leave a lot of things at chance. You need to have your jokes very set. You need to try and build them to build the anticipation before you throw the punchline. And it feels a little bit like an art form of words, because maybe it's a different topic, stand-up on its own. But in the podcast, I want it to be more free and probably more unpolished, but then it can come out once a week. For the open mics, you can actually put the work, and I have a methodology for that to try and refine the jokes and make them hit more and try to get more laughs. Yeah.
I know a lot of stand-up comedians, especially the big ones, they go to smaller gigs and just practice and take notes. I live in London, loads of comedy clubs around, and I even go to practice nights where actual comedians practice, and they actually stand up there with a notebook and they say a joke and they're like, oh, this one didn't hit, and you see them take notes in the notepad. Is that similar to what you do then as well? No, you just practice and refine it and create the craft?
I was always too shy to get up with a notebook. Yes, I usually have a post-it note with a few things. But what you could be, you can always know if the premise of your joke is good or not. So every joke has an underlying like premise, like the main premise of the joke you're making. If you believe you have a good premise and then you deliver a joke, you can usually feel it needs this weird awareness of how people laughed or not. But if you have the premise and then you say the joke in three different ways in an audience, you will see which way worked a bit more. And then that says something. Maybe it says that you need to spend some time before you hit the joke. Sometimes it even comes to one word, that if you change that one word, it just hits. It's a very weird thing. And for me, it often comes through abstraction, like removing things. When you first write the joke, it usually has a lot of words. You're trying to explain with too many ways. And when you get more comfortable and you say it many times, you start removing things. You don't need all these words. Maybe you just change your tone in a way. Maybe you just hold a long pause in a way. Maybe you look at the audience or you make a physical move. So you can actually, it's a weird thing with comedy that it starts with the words because you write the jokes, but then you take things out and you take things out until you have a mix that gets out what you want, but it's also physical in a way. And there are comedians that have a style that they look very serious, they never laugh. But if you think about it, that's also a pattern of how their jokes go. And if you teach your pattern to your audience, they follow it. So if you build a 5 minute in which your joke delivery follows a bit of a pattern, you will have a pattern because you're a person, you write your own jokes. It's not that you have 10 different ways to do it, but there is this weird rhythm that if you can feel and put the audience in it, then you're vibing back and forth. And I think this is what comedians try to find when they are practicing their jokes. Sometimes you didn't create enough of an awareness of what the topic is before you throw the joke. So maybe you need to spend more time warming it up. Sometimes you made the punchline, but it wasn't the right wording. So people did not actually get it. But that was the climax of the joke. So now that they didn't get it, it's kind of lost. So it's a weird form of art. I actually think that great comedians, despite their personal stuff, so Louis C.K. for me is a top comedian in terms of craft. If you look at his stand-up word by word and you analyze what each word tries to do in the story of building the joke, I find it being like a masterpiece in some of his earlier stuff. It's built word by word. So in that case, they don't do improv. I think they have a perfectly crystallized final version that they are performing like actors, and they do it so long that they feel so comfortable in it. And yeah, it goes like that.
But when you joined the science stand-up comedy group or organization, did they tell you as well what makes a joke funny? Is it because I did some very basic research before this, and pretty much a lot of things or sources say it's like an unexpected ending to the premise. So you expect one thing, but you hear something else. Or, well, the unexpected ending could be you mention something and you're like, well, yeah, that's stupid. And I didn't even realize it. Like city chicken sounds like shitty chicken. You're like, didn't realize that. That's actually so simply confused.
What you're saying is a type of joke that's called push the logic. It's the type of joke saying, oh, my grandpa died peacefully in his sleep, unlike the rest of the students in the school bus he was driving. So you start playing with something, and then, as you said, you bring something unexpected on top of it. Um, this is this is something I also enjoy, and you can do it while you build a story. You start from one place, and then you kind of throw things off. But you have, in a big storytelling, you have people with you. If you have people with you, then you can afford to throw a few of these teases in them, and they still stay with you because you're like, where is this going? Like, okay, where is this? Where are you actually going with this? And I myself enjoy when my logic gets pushed from jokes. I'm like, ooh, you're doing something weird in my head. I was not expecting that. And that's entertaining because otherwise it's just what I expect is happening, and that's boring. So you need to keep doing these little kicks here and there when you do storytelling because you don't have a punchline. You're not going, it's not a line that you will say. It could be one that helps, but it's not the final act. Your act is the journey, as you said. So I think in that journey, you need to keep it interesting enough. And to keep it interesting enough, you need to kind of keep them guessing.
Yeah.
I don't remember how it goes, but the South Park people and the city chicken is one of the South Park jokes, actually. So it's not one of my jokes. There is an episode about a city chicken, and it's run by an Asian guy, and it's back in the day where this was more less inappropriate. The next phone is mine. But the South Park people were doing a seminar around storytelling, And they had a very simple technique. If someone is interested, they should look it up, because the technique was, in every storyline, you should never have end. The word end to connect things is forbidden. You should say something, and then it should be a but something happened. And then therefore. These were the two words, but and therefore, if I remember correctly.
That is interesting, because especially, well, we talked about stand-up comedy, but for improv comedy, the rule is no, you don't say no. You always say yes and.
Mm.
So it's very interesting that they say the opposite, because with the yes and, you always build on top of the story that's going, and especially because you might be more than one person, or likely more than one person in improv comedy, you build upon it with different puzzle pieces that can create a kind of ridiculous story. So I find it very interesting that they said but and therefore.
Therefore, I think in an improv, you expect this absurdity to build up. So I feel it. Like someone brings something absurd and say, yes, and then you build on top of it. And it feels like you're building this huge absurd thing that in the end it will explode. Because in improv, it usually ends with something very ridiculous. Everyone is laughing, and the whole thing kind of comes to an end through laugh and decompression, and it deflates. I would think in a South Park episode, it's a little bit like this thing happened, but then something else happened. Therefore, it changed our plot now, because now we're there. So we are there, but that this is going on, something else happens. And therefore, now we are changing. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I would think in a 20-minute episode in a show like that, what you get is this, um, yeah, things go wrong, and then things go another direction, and then something happens and things go in another way. And I think this is how they keep the absurdity going. Rick and Morty does
Yeah,
this as well. It's like you think it's going one way, the episode,
that is
something
true.
completely different happens, which changes what is happening now. Okay, we're not here anymore. We're not in the living room. Now we are in a parallel universe, and this is the storyline. But then someone comes from the past and brings another thing. Therefore, now we are against these people. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah,
throwing things
but
out.
we've collected a lot of insights already from you now. So for a good story, I guess, think of the title. What is it actually you want to communicate? Get the three main points. Maybe for a comedy, but I can imagine that for an actual storytelling as well. Simplify it, so don't make it too excessive in terms of if wording, not too much fluff. I guess something you do really great in your podcast is give very good and clear examples,
Mm.
or relational examples. Um, Maybe people need to learn how to think as visually as you, and then they can learn it. Um, and
There's a
then
last way, I'm sorry to interrupt, which is called the hook. You will see it in every TEDx talk, where if you believe your audience will not have the patience to stay with you, but you have something that's like wild. Sometimes people start with a title that it's almost like, no way this makes sense. You start with a hook that will be like, I don't know, did you know that 99% of this is the other thing around? It could be a statistic, it would be a wild claim. And this is also an easy way for people starting with storytelling, because then you have people captivated for quite some time. So you start with the big thing. It's called the hook. You grab them, you're like, boom, do you know that this is a thing? And they're like, what? And then they can stay for quite longer. So I have an
okay,
example, actually, last thing. The dagger of Tutankhamun, the famous pharaoh of Egypt, he had a dagger that was made out of a meteorite. And you're like,
okay.
what? How did they do that? What? Is that real? So you hear something like this. It's almost like the clickbait, but it's true. So that's another way to do storytelling. If you're, I don't know, if you really want people to stay with you, at least for the first part, you can do that as well.
So my hook for this podcast is going to be stay until the end if you want to know why I think that all of Ermis's communication skills is the most important part if you want to succeed with AI.
Sounds good. Sometimes I tell the AI, give me a title for my podcast that comes out of Mr. Beast. It's a disaster. It's not working. But it's also
Uh,
interesting to think of people like that, which is in a completely different craft, and how they create their hooks. Um,
yeah.
Too clickbaity, but still
No.
knowledge.
One last question before I actually want to go into your career and then shift over to AI, which is what the whole internet is yearning for. Um, you are Greek. You mentioned you didn't know if you should have your podcast in Greek or in English. And I remember actually an ex-colleague of ours, fun piece of information. Ermis and I used to work at the same company. Ermis still works there. But an ex-colleague of ours actually once posted on LinkedIn saying that, or creating awareness for language discrimination for people who are clearly not native speakers in English. This person is not a native speaker, but her English, in my opinion, is excellent. Um, how how do you handle that? That you seem so confident, like now in this podcast and your own podcast. Um, I don't understand Greek, so I couldn't really watch your stand-up comedy on YouTube. Um, Still need to learn Greek for that. But yeah, how do you handle the whole thing of this is not my first language, but I still communicate so comfortably in it? What would you tell other people who are not native speakers?
Um, First of all, just on a background, Greeks are so what's the word, obsessed with learning English. Like if your parents would take you from school to a special private English school because the public education is not so strong to teach you proper English. It's only a few hours a week and very thin. It's a cultural thing in Greece that it's a standard if you are providing education to your kids that they go to after school, which is private, for them to learn English. And the final goal is what is called the proficiency. It's the proficiency of English, but in Greek they just say proficiency, which is the C2 exams of either Michigan or Cambridge. They have this language examination, and C2 is the last level, which means now you're done with speaking English. So there's a super strong background of going all the way to a C2 diploma, ideally before you're even 18, because when you're 18, you need to do national exams that take a lot of time to prepare for university. So there is part that was pressure from there that created a
Mhm.
good baseline. I think for me, what made me more comfortable was consuming a lot of information. And today there are so many podcasts that I find them a great way to get used to how language can work and the nuances of language. And I'm not so much, I try to always read books, but it can take more time. So it's tricky. So I would say just movies, video games, podcasts, this friction with the language was what helped me. And then I was fortunate enough to work in an international company, so I had to polish my English a little bit more, um, because I don't know. The most important thing for me in a work context is to be able to be understood. And
Yeah.
sometimes the wrong word or the wrong thing can give a different impression, and it is something that happens. So I always paid a little bit of extra attention to that. The good thing now is with AI, you can always polish your text. And I think that is actually helping a lot of people, not in doing their work for them, but in helping polish a little bit. And we don't all need to talk like AI, but that has brought some help. Like, how do I phrase this thing that I'm feeling without stepping on sensitive nerves or without coming across as blah, blah, blah? So if you use a little bit of that, then your brain also saves it. Then it becomes
Yeah.
easier for you to do that. But I, yeah.
How do you handle the part of? I mean, we all have accents, and I think a lot of people get hung up on, oh, I don't sound British, I don't sound American, I don't sound Australian, I don't sound like I'm from a native speaking country. Um, how do you? Is that something that ever was on your mind, or were you like, I'm just confident enough to overcome that?
Um, That's also a good question because when my Greek friends hear me speak, they feel weird because I don't have the Greek accent, which I know how it is because it is the one where you don't pronounce anything and it's more closed mouth. I think what's important for me is to find a way that feels that you can roll, like whatever it is that you can roll. I think that that's more important than how your accent sounds like. Of course, it should be audible. what I'm in is I also know that I pronounce things not the greatest way. So I try to remember to open my mouth a little bit more or have an awareness that if I'm saying like type of sounds, it's not so easy. But yeah, the world can be more difficult if you have an accent. But I still think that the ability to feel comfortable in your speech is more important than the rest. I hope that makes sense. I've seen in a business context people saying, could you say that one more time? Could you please repeat it
Yeah.
a bit slower? But your brain being able to fire on all cylinders in the way you need to be able to think when you are in a business context and when you are in these situations where you need to, I don't know, process and bring output. For me, it feels much more natural to not block yourself with, because if you focus on trying to speak in a certain way, I feel there's a part that will take away from your actual thought process. I don't know if it makes sense. But yeah,
Yeah.
keep what you have and make it be the most comfortable for you. I think this.
Oh, that's good advice. Going from communication and learning how to tell stories, which I guess is the essence of culture, and you work in people, which late 2010s companies still called people and culture, and before the 2010s, people just called it, or companies just called it, human resources. But apparently, we're being respected now and seen as people, and apparently, we have culture. But before we then jump into exactly how you guys really get AI into a company, I just want to understand a bit better what does people and culture or working in people actually means, because I assume it's a very wide array of things. I read through your CV. I know you've done technical hiring first because you have a technical degree, um, but I mean, obviously, the culture part somehow comes in there.
Yes. I would say a typical people team will in a company that is bigger than a few hundred. In the beginning, everyone does everything. If you have an HR people department with a couple of people, they need to wear multiple hats. But in a more structured environment, you would see the people team having a talent acquisition side. So this is everything that has to do with hiring, getting the right talent in time, having a process that is just a joy to be at it. It's fast and people feel valued, and then you get basically get the talent that you need in the time that you need. There is a function of the partnering side, what is called people partners, which is basically people advisors that help the company. Let's say you're a manager, something is going on with your people, you don't know how to handle it. It could be that you don't know how to handle it from a managerial perspective, not having the right skills to have the right conversations to help someone perform better. Or it could be that you don't know the context of the country you're in. So maybe there's something legal, maybe someone is close to a burnout. You need to navigate a space where you don't always have the knowledge, whether it is legislation or it is advisory. Then the people partners are there from the people team that have the knowledge around employment law. They have the knowledge around how uh, to manage people, how to do performance talks, how to do difficult conversations. So then they come in to help resolve conflicts or to take something and escalate it, because maybe you're a manager and something is happening in your hands that you don't know what you need to do with it, and maybe I don't know, it's a case that needs to go somewhere else to be resolved. So it's a little bit like advisors and mediators. That's another team. There's the workplace team or workplace and experience, the people responsible for all of the office spaces, all of the uh, real estate portfolio, you would say, in a corporate place, the vendor management, who brings us milk, who brings us paper, what is all of that world of keeping the lights on and keeping things there? Or even occupational health and safety. Hey, can we put a door here? Maybe not, because we don't have enough space for a wheelchair. Or if this building catches fire, how do we all go out? So there is also that side of things. There's of course people experience, which is what you feel, what you what your life is at the company. It goes from, it's interesting. The experience is almost everything that is intangible on top of the operational things. So if you're in an office and the lights go on and everything is there, that's the layer. But then the experience would be if you had, I don't know, a wall where you can put photos and an announcement board that you can have your hobbies, and a club of board games that you can do things. Um, but yeah, the experience side of things gets embedded in everything you do operational wise. And then on top of that, it can create culture with understanding what type of people do you have, what do they care about, what are some causes that matter to them. So maybe you can create the ERG groups, like active communities of anything that feels important. Because if something is important and you have a way to express it, and the company helps you, then it becomes a little bit more meaningful. And that could be either a social club. So I love movies.
Mhm.
Hey, can we make a movie club? We have a huge projector. We watch all hands every week. Can we just meet and put a nice movie and buy a few snacks? Yes, of course you can. And you can make a social club of watching movies, and that's great. Or it could be something behind a cause. Say, hey, I volunteer every weekend and I do this. Does the company want to support that? What if I ask around in the office? Maybe all together we could do that once. So it's being able to identify these things, support them, help them grow, help them get recognized. Yeah, experiential culture is a big chapter. Um, then there are a bit more boring day-to-day things. You need to have a payroll set in place. Sometimes it sits in finance teams, other times it sits in HR teams. You need to resolve people's problems. So you have an operations team that basically creates the backbone of how do the policies come in place? What is the parental leave policy, the time off policy, the sick policy, working from abroad, all of these policies that exist in companies. There is usually a backbone of being able to capture information, having all your people data in an HR information system. So you're able to put out a report, or if someone, um, yeah, just have data and to understand what do your people need and do surveys and all of that. So different teams. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but the bigger a company gets, the more complicated things get, because then you need to have strategy, understand what is the rest of the company doing? Where do we want to be in 3 years? How do we make sure we have a strategy that is in line with where we want to go? And
Can you
what does
give
that
some
mean?
examples of these strategies? Because I know as well you work with C-level on these things. What are the things they are asking for in terms of strategy? Is it C-level and business needs in terms of revenue that dictates strategy, and then people and culture aligns, or are those two different things that completely need to converge?
No, they're not different things. You should be sitting on the same table discussing. I will give examples that are not Pleo specific. They're a bit more generic. But we did see how many companies in like 2020, 2019, there was this growth at all costs mentality. So companies were quickly trying to get a lot of market share and then expand as much as possible within their operations. We saw companies jump up to $1 billion valuations very quickly, and a lot of money was coming in from investors to just take more market share, whether it's the gorillas or the delivery heroes or the Wolts or the electric scooters. Everything was grow, 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 and then we'll figure it out. So when you have a strategy like this, you also need to bring a people strategy that say, how do we get the best people right now? What is that people, these hungry people for growth? What do they want on top? So maybe you have a strategy that gives, I don't know, more stock options or more warrants or more flexibility if someone is hitting their targets. And you just try to, yeah, accommodate or bring a strategy that aligns with what the company needs to do. Now, fast forward a few years later, a lot of war is going on, a lot of uncertainty is going on, a lot of that tech money started retracting. This is before the AI boom. So I'm talking in between. So then it was all about, operational efficiency. We cannot be growing at all costs and spending money everywhere. We need to win where we are strong. So then if you want to do that as a people team, you could look at the markets you're already in and you have a strong presence and understand, okay, if we want to empower these markets even more, what do we need to do there? And maybe then you invest, I don't know, to making great office spaces and create more branding and see your people on the ground and understand and empower them to feel that they are in one of the main attention focus markets of the company and bring that into place. Or maybe in the maturity journey, you realize, wow, you grew very quickly. Now we need expertise. We've reached at a stage where we need people who have done this before, know how to go from stage C to stage D, or know how to go towards an IPO. We need to get better at specializing, deep diving, making sure we have things in place. So then the people strategy would be, oh, how do I attract these people? Do I have a benefits program that was tailored for a hungry 20-year-old that wants to conquer the world? But what if I need to hire someone much more later in life with a family and kids that might need to relocate and has a different set of needs? Am I able to attract that type of talent? And yeah, it's always a mix and match between what the company needs to do and how does that translate in a people strategy that can support it. Of course, there are times where the people strategy needs to drive the business. If we talk about the EU directive for transparency is coming up in all of the countries. So the companies need to be able to report on all sorts of things, on DEI, on pay gaps and all of this. So this is, for example, one of the places where there is a very set people goal that we need to work with. So then it is the different departments or other parts of the business that all work together to help that goal that stems from the people side. So it
Yeah.
comes and goes.
Yeah. And then now you specifically focus on AI within the people team.
Yes.
And so from what I know, you focus on how can specifically the people team leverage AI. I know you're building a knowledge sharing hub
Mhm.
using Notebook LM, which is from Google. And I was hoping maybe you've been doing this role for roughly half a year. We could learn from your wisdom because there's so much AI out there. And I think the most important, or one of the most important things, the second most important thing after knowing how to communicate would be how do you leverage AI at this point?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How was this role created, and then what are your main focus points?
So the focus was created out of a need to have someone with the finger on the pulse because things are changing very fast and the whole AI field brings so many new things so quickly. So it's actually difficult to make time to understand everything that's coming and how can that help or not and how does it shape the future. You need to be actively paying attention to it, which requires time. So I was very fortunate to be reached out by our chief people officer who said, hey, listen, I've seen how you've worked with these teams. You've brought a lot of cool tools there. You've built automations. I really like how you have been like solving things. I know your background is in computer science. So actually, I think we should try out this role. It can be for a set amount of time where basically you go out there, you see what's there, and the improvements you brought to one team, you try to bring to every team. And he had a good pitch because he said, if you say no to this role, just know that I want to hire for this role anyways. We need this type of role within the company. And I don't know how it's going to be successful. You need to figure that out. But I think if we don't take the opportunity to try a role like this out on the grand scheme of things, we're missing out. Which was exciting and a bit scary because you need to decide what does success look like in this role and how do I go about this. But very quickly, we did an analysis and we found the biggest pain points in the people team, like the load of incoming people tickets that need resolution. It's very high. There are a lot of people trying to solve tickets. A lot of them are repeatable. A lot of them.
What does a ticket mean? Or like, can you give an example?
Yes, I need an employment letter. Can you make one for me?
Oh,
Or I thought I have 5 days in my balance. I see that it's 4. What's happening? Or I
vacation
want,
balance, I guess you mean.
sorry, yes, time off. Like my time off days
Yeah.
look wrong. Um, I want to bring my dog in the office on Wednesdays. Can I do that? Or more complicated things. I'm applying for a visa and they're asking me for these types of papers. Who can help me out? Or I'm going for parental leave in 4 months. I need to, how does this work? I have no idea. So people come with these questions that they have to do mostly with how the policies are applied, with their specific information. So if you ask this question and you're based in the UK, the answer, is different than if you ask this question and you're based in Denmark. So you get a lot of question of people that need either information, they need to change something in the system that is wrong, they need some time of document, they need to start some procedure. Um, and this can create a big workload. So yeah, this is one side of things, all the incoming types of requests. In a smaller company, it can be that someone DMs you and says, hey, Seb, can you help me out with this? In a more structured place, you try to have a ticketing system so you understand how many of these am I getting? Is there a big area where we see more concentrated questions? Because that probably means we have a gap in our systems or our processes. And then it helps understand workload and distribute workload. So if you need more people in the team to support, it's easier to go to a stakeholder and say, hey, listen, this is our workload, this is our score, how well we're solving tickets, this is our medium time to resolve it. So you bring a data layer to help yourself have these conversations. So through that, we could see that we have more incoming tickets than what we should for a company of our size, for a company of our setup. So this was one place to try and see what can we do, because very often people ask things not because they don't know where to find the answer, but because there is a low certainty that the answer is still valid. If your information architecture is not great and people doubt that what they find is the most relevant thing or it's up to date, they will come to ask just to be sure and make sure.
Is that where Notebook LM comes in and you building a knowledge hub?
Yes. Notebook LM has been decommissioned now because
Okay.
it was solving the problem, but we're looking into more sophisticated solutions. But I can explain this part as a layer of things that should be in place to make life easier. So let's make this third example. AI in people team. One use case is this. Level 1, build a knowledge base with all the information you have. This could mean that you need to clean up old things, create new policies, but you need to have your data correct. If your policies and your documentation is wrong, none of this will work.
And this is not AI yet. This is just pure documentation in a
Yeah,
tool like Confluence, Notion, Google Docs, anything. You just have it written
exactly.
down correctly.
Yes. And
Okay.
you can use an AI to help you write a lot of things or any of that, but we don't have AI yet. We just have a list of documentation that's there. Then you bring an AI on top of this and you try to create a deflection system. So if someone comes and say, hey, Seb, how do I do this? The system will go look at the whole knowledge base of information and say, hey, Seb, hi, I'm the AI. I think what you're asking is the answer is this one. Is that correct or not? If it's not correct, it still becomes a ticket. A person needs to check it out. So this is like the level 1 of deflection. We feed our system, we connect it to the right place where information exists, and it tries to answer. The second level would be if it could learn from previous answers. If I have answered something 10 times now as an agent of the system, as a person working, it should also read that answer, understand it's the right one, and in the future surface it again. So this is like a level 2, just learn from previously resolved questions. And now it starts getting interesting because level 1 and level 2 you can find pretty often in the systems that are out there. But for a people team, level 3, and this is leveling is my interpretation of it, is to connect that AI to your HRIS system. The HRIS system is the system that holds all the information about people, which means that it's where you go and you say your name and your title, your address, your tenure, your other private fields that maybe you can only see, your emergency contacts, whatever it is. But if you connect the AI ticketing or whatever system to that, then it's better because when Seb asks, hey, Ermis, how does parental leave work? The AI that just listens to documentation has no way of knowing, hey, Seb has passed his probation period, he's based in the UK,
Mm.
his contract is of this type, he's been with us for 7 years. All that information basically could mean that your answer is different. And if the AI cannot access that information, it would just give you a generic answer. So the first level of deflection is still good enough because it deflects a lot of things. But if you want to get a more personalized approach that really checks who you are and brings the relevant policy, knows your manager, knows your, like it can make a very specific answer, then you need to connect to your HRIS. And the fourth level, and I'll stop, is to identify workflows that need to happen often and try to bring those in. Example, hey, I need an employment letter. I need a letter that verifies I work for this company for this amount of time because I'm applying for an apartment, for a loan, for a visa, for a whatever. Right now, this is all manual. It goes to a person. They need to grab your data. They need to find the right template and create it and sign it and blah, 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 blah. Imagine if the AI could get this request. Seb is asking for an employment letter. Let me look into the HRIS to grab his information. Okay, name, full name, address, blah, blah, blah. Whatever is needed for an employment letter is just data placeholders that exist in the system already. So in an ideal world, it could see who you are, get the right template in place, put the right information from the HRIS into that place, and the people person, the HR person, would just have to see a ready-made document with everything filled in, do what we call a 4-eye check, that two people look at it and say, yeah, it's good, and send it out. So that would be when we start entering more workflows and automations. And that can go a long way, but that is where things get more cool. So
that is a pretty cool example. Some other questions in terms of AI that I wonder if you're trying to answer those questions for your team as well. The first one would actually be, if someone gets this output of information from the AI, what training do you give your team, or what training should people have on AI? And also, does that include any kind of management of, well, I want to call it brain rot. I hope no one's brain is actually getting worse when at work, but like suddenly when some of the main work has been done and now you just need to review it. Because an example is, already when I was preparing for this podcast episode, I was putting a ton of information in about you. I was like, I want to answer these general questions, and I saw my brain was like doing great. The second I pressed enter and it went into Gemini, that's the LLM that I'm using. The second I had to read it, I felt my brain just turned off. Is that something you try to manage as well with your team or within your company?
This is a great point. We not specifically, but we are making efforts in the reporting to understand if the usage of the AI is actually helping. What I mean is the fact that you are using Gemini and LLM does not necessarily correlate with performance or with improvement, or with you feeling that you're saving time. So this is one side of it. I think where we're focusing now is, I talked about a very specific system before, but the main thing everyone should understand is how to bring the AI be like your co-pilot, like help you in your day-to-day things, whether it is, I just had this huge meeting. Remind me, what are my action points? What is the summary of this? What do I need to do? Whether it is hiring or creating a job post or getting a lot of information in and distilling it. So the first part is having this companion next to you that can do things. I don't know how many people use that so extensively. If there is communications done, then it does actually help a lot, and you could switch your brain a little bit off. However, in a company setup where you have the specific language and specific tone, it's usually, for me, I see it as it does 80% of the work for me. Then I need to do the important 10% to make sure that this is tailored in the right way when we talk about communications. So I still feel that it takes the boring part out, and then I still have my own touch to finish it. Otherwise, I do feel that something is lost. But level one is to have your co-pilot that you bring things to it, you do some back and forth. I think the second level is to actually understand what specific parts of your day-to-day could get a mini automation in them. Like, I do these 5 consequent like things all the time. What could be a way to make this a little bit better? Because then it's not AI that is just the LLM. It's AI that you could maybe make 3 things connected and then make a tiny workflow that saves you 20 minutes every day, which would be more than an hour a week. Which
Do you actively train your team or maybe even the whole company on thinking this way? Like, how can I save time through AI? Because especially if we get the culture part into people and culture. Have a feeling that, especially we just had a lot of companies had a lot of layoffs during COVID. A lot of big tech had layoffs just a year ago. And I think a lot of people may fear AI as if it's the new competent employee, and they may not even want to use it. How do you train people to think exactly the way you said of, hey, this is where I can save time and I can personally even become more proficient, or I can even create proficiency for the whole company? Because I'm sure people are scared of becoming obsolete themselves.
100%. I understand that side. However, I think two different things. One, if you are in a people team, I think that you have the responsibility to be part of this AI change when it happens in a company. If this change is happening without a people team involved, then it could result in, I don't know, less. It's a strategy we talked before. If the company is embracing AI, it has such a big impact on people that it needs to be something you're driving with a people strategy on the forefront. So far, it has been such a massive gain in productivity if you teach people how to use AI in their day to day, that it's creating a lot of value in being able to have the boring things done and more time for exciting things. In a company context that is, especially like a scale up where there's a lot of things you could get your hands on, there's a lot of opportunity of new areas. I personally see it as a way to free some of yourself to be able to get involved with things that are more interesting, because there's always more work. You can always lift your hand up and say, hey, you know what? I will help out on this side or on this project. The second reality is that, unfortunately, AI is, or fortunately, is coming. It is a change that is happening and in a way seems to be inevitable. These systems are being developed, these systems are being embedded in every single bit of work. You're doing a podcast, you're using AI. I'm doing
Yeah.
my hobby, playing guitar, I will be using AI. No matter what you're doing, an AI counterpart will be there to take some part of it to make life easier. So when you have a company context, one of the best things you can do, in my opinion, is to upskill people in the craft that they have, in how to combine that craft with AI. And I think that what we will see in the future much more, uh, well, before I say that, I think the danger exists in entry level jobs. So if you have an entry level job where you need to learn something new at this point in time, because the AI came in very fast, I think that it's more difficult for someone coming fresh out of a uni and trying to get an entry level job to do that. I think these jobs might be taking a hit. However, I think that very quickly what we will see is the understanding of AI and embedding AI within your craft will start coming into schools and unis. So then the same way that now you want to hire a Gen Z to do your TikTok or a Gen A to do your, I don't know, Minecraft server that has commercials in, or whatever the new thing is. Roboblox is the new thing. I don't even understand what it is. In the same way, you will have an intern that is strong AI plus craft, and then that will come in. So I think right now we're experiencing a gap in which AI is trying to get some of the entry level tasks someone would do, and it's doing it well enough that it could shrink some of the entry level positions. But I think that things adapt very quickly. And I do see schools already bringing AI in. And I think in a few years, it will be like that. You get someone fresh who's not just an intern, is also an AI strong understanding type of intern that you need in. Because in the same way they told me, hey, go out there, look what's happening with AI and bring it to us because we need to
Yeah.
understand it. That will be already embedded into what type of talent you bring in.
I think that's
And
a very interesting, unique perspective on it, because I feel like people either are always on the one of the extremes of AI will not develop much further than it is, and it will only be a language model, or there are some people who are like, it will take over almost all jobs.
I will bring one more thing on the AI and the responsibility of the people teams, because I think it's important. The responsibility to upskill an organization together with AI, I think, in my opinion, is the best thing you can do, because it's being done in a controlled way. You can have a position in what you bring in. Everything we bring in the people team, we're talking with the people that are solving their problem and say, what are your needs? What do you want the system to do? What would make your life easier? But if I were to imagine myself, and I know that I am fortunate to have this AI role now, right? I think if I didn't have it, the best scenario for me would be to understand how to do my job with AI systems. Because if I were ever to look for something new, what better thing to do than enter a position that you already know the AI part of? So even if we're talking about a bad scenario in which, for whatever reason, you change companies, if you have been upskilled in your craft plus AI beforehand, that's kind of the best thing we can do as professionals. The reality is that AI is taking a lot of space in our day to day everywhere from cooking to work. So, yeah, I do think that the best case scenario for any professional is to be able to understand how AI enhances their work. And it could be that, I don't know, let's say I get out of Clio tomorrow, I could go to a company that has not yet been part of this journey, because this is a journey that will take years and years and years for companies to do. Not everyone is sitting at the top being ready to change their entire structures and their entire ways of working. And things are, we see what we see is the top of the iceberg. But the reality is, if you look at the most of the companies around you, things are very, very slow. Yeah, so I see it as a benefit having seen how some of it looks like, even if it does mean you would change jobs at some point. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I really like and I admire the fact that you're really embracing AI, and I think also you're lucky that you're in a company that really does that. When you work with your different stakeholders on understanding what are their needs as well in terms of AI, what would you say are the key needs, and also what training do you provide people, and what are like how should someone, at least in, what are the basics of AI someone should know? Because everyone knows how to write in ChatGPT, but I guess it goes so much deeper.
Yeah, this is a good question. The prompt engineering side of things is basically number one, how do you ask the system in the way to get what you want back? But I think there is a lot to benefit out of visualization and data. Like now you can very quickly get a spreadsheet and ask Gemini or ChatGPT or anything to draw value and insights out of it. So a lot of the time in work, we spend time trying to convince people that what we think is right. Like the data says this, or this is what we need to change, or this is why this doesn't make sense, or this is why this makes sense. Like there's a lot of time spent to find out the best approach. I actually find AI to be a very helpful tool to make data make sense without needing to spend months of building the dashboards. And of course, you will build dashboards for your operations and your revenue and your sales. But if I'm trying to, in my day to day, bring a point across to you, and I can very quickly download a report, throw it into an AI, say, hey, I have these 5 questions. What is our, I don't know, yeah, medium resolution time? When I talked about this tickets system, I downloaded every ticket that existed and did an AI analysis. And I saw what are the top use cases we have? What are the low hanging fruits? What is this? What is that? So I actually really like that it can enable data and insight backed storytelling and conversations, because reality is very often you find yourself in conversations where it's anecdotal, hearsay. Oh, they say this is not working, or you have a lot of things that are not able to back up, or they come from a sentimental place and they're trying to drive a conversation around business and operations. And the truth is, most systems are capturing data. So now we don't need to have a team of people that gets that data to help us get insights. We can very quickly do it on our own. So this is one thing. Your narrative, your storytelling, the way that you are bringing your arguments and your positions can get a massive uplift with AI. So this is something everyone should know how to do. I think the second thing is to, when you understand your pain points in a system, then the the stakeholder can always understand the pain points. So if you're having that conversation, what is hard for you and why, and you capture that as information, then you could understand what AI could solve for them without them needing to know everything around AI to find it themselves. So it's also a conversation within the company of what are the opportunities we have. A third thing that I will say is that a lot of systems are developing very fast. So there are all the tools you already have in the company and all the tools that you could get into the company. And I think that if you are managing tools, or if you are a stakeholder that has budget under them, or if you are in a position of decision making or decision influence, you should spend the time to do two things. One, look out there in the market. What exists right now that is bringing solutions to what you're doing in an easier, faster, more efficient way? You need to understand that, because this is where the world is right now. Then you need to look internally. What do I have in place, and how much overlap do we have? Does it make sense to spend money? And then on all the tooling that you have, you need to check out the roadmaps, because all of them are building AI. So it could be that you try to bring a tool externally to make your existing setup better, but already in your current setup, one of these tools is embracing AI on its own, has a roadmap that in 3 months will solve most of your problems, and you're just creating friction and spending money on bringing something else in. So I would say find your pain points, see what's out there, see what's inside, see the roadmap of what's inside, and then make your bets.
I think that was very interesting, especially the roadmap part. I think a lot of people wouldn't think of that one. You kind of touched upon two different things. One was more concepts in terms of knowing what data you can upload and what questions you can ask it, how you prompt it. And the other part was tooling. If someone is new to AI, what would you tell them to focus on to upskill in terms of AI? Is it understanding, are there specific main tools they should learn? Or is it all about concepts at the moment? What is possible out there, and how do you educate yourself on AI?
That's a good question. For myself, to keep myself educated, I have found a few Substack and newsletters that have to do specifically with HR, people, teams, tooling, AI. So I get 1 or 2 newsletters every week. And sometimes what they bring is more a conversation around topics, not exactly a nugget of knowledge I should keep, but things to open your awareness into, oh, this is an area of things that might be happening. So this is definitely one. Find newsletters. For me, newsletters work well. It could be a podcast, because there are some HR podcasts, usually sponsored by big tools, but still they're holding conversations around these topics. It could be that LinkedIn can be a good place if you start being in the AI. The danger is to getting too much information. But still in LinkedIn, I see posts like, oh, these are the top AI HR tools that any professional should be using. And then it all comes into the mix of every once in a while looking what's out there. But then if that feels like a lot, I think that start engaging with an LLM, whether it's OpenAI, whether it's Gemini, whether it's, I don't know, Notion AI, whatever your company has allowed you to have access to, because the privacy is also important. You could just say, hey, I am Ermis, and I'm working as a people partner in a company of 800 people. My main stakeholders are in these types of markets. I want to understand, how could AI help me in my day-to-day? And maybe it starts asking you, okay, how many times did you have to hold this type of conversation? Or do you find your leaders coming for these types of questions? And maybe very quickly the AI gives a plan for you and be like, hey, how about we create a knowledge bank of all the things you get asked, and then we can help out sending it out. How about I help you make some templates for performance talks, one-to-one talks, conflict resolution? It could help bring documentation. And then through that talk, I think you can get into more complex places, like, oh my God, every day I have to open my inbox and look at my emails and find the emails that have to do about this topic and then reply to them. If you say that to an LLM, just bring your frustrations. It would say, oh, I can help you create a filter for that. I can help you create a simple workflow that we will connect your Gmail with your Slack. And when you get that specific type of email you need to pay attention to, I will ping you in Slack and say, hey, Ermis, that type of email just came in. Like there's so many possibilities that it can bring because it knows a whole lot of things you don't know. So I think you just need to keep open, not see it as an enemy, just see it as a friend or someone who knows a lot of things, and go with your childish curiosity and ignorance and saying, "Hi, this is what I'm doing. Help me get better at AI. I'm lost. What are first steps?" So even through that, you would get massive value, even without the newsletters, without the LinkedIn, without the podcasts.
And honestly, I think that was the open-mindedness was a very good point, and also why I really wanted to cover your podcast and the stand-up comedy part, because that is all about the perception of the world and being open-minded and aware. Um, and why I really wanted to cover the communication part, because I think with AI being, and also to not see AI as a enemy, I think it's important to see what is the worth of the human still at the end. Because if the AI can do all the quite a bit of the analysis of a Google sheet and some data and outputs that you give it, I guess the important task of you as a human being is still to convey this whole message
And to ask the
to
right
other
question.
people and to ask the right questions. Because now, if you need to go to your manager or a colleague and be like, "Hey, how do we put this in place?" or even convince them to put something in place, it's still you who has to tell the story on why.
Exactly. And of course, the podcast and everything also has the world is not a great place, and things can be dark and gloomy. It is a point of perception, and I often say in the podcast, "Hey, worst case scenario, come to my village and we all grow tomatoes." So there's also that side of me that sometimes thinks, okay, if the aliens come and they're not here to save us, actually, then what is the plan Z? What is the plan Omega? And that also gives me some comfort in my head. I don't know
Yeah,
what the thinking of things that could go wrong to a big extent, whether it's work on life or anything, and just still finding a scenario that I'm like, okay, if all goes so bad, then at least here, I'll do it this way. That gives me comfort of mind. And I just say that to say that it's not just blissful ignorance. I do think that there are real dangers out there. I don't think they have to
yeah,
do so much with the workforce being replaced, because this has happened so far in the past with industrialization and with other
mm,
types of things. I think people will find things to do, even if we all become influencers of, I don't know, doing a craft home while someone is paying for us. I think we will find a way, but there are real dangers in pursuing super intelligence with different countries competing to it and embedding those systems into decision making, into geopolitics, and like the whole type of global friction getting supercharged by AI and bringing the decision making outside of people and into a system. And there are things that we should be mindful and that could be worrying. So, yeah, awareness is a double-sided sword, I would
yeah.
guess.
Just one last question: if you were in my seat asking you questions, and you're the only one who has a full overview of what's inside of your brain, all the wisdom that's in there, what question would you ask yourself?
Oi, oi, oi. I think the an important question to ask is, what are the things that keep you going? It sounds like a depressing one, but what I mean is life is very demanding, and growing up, you get hit with this. You don't understand it from the memes. You don't understand it from people saying, "Oh, when you are my age, you will understand." It needs to hit you to understand it. So I feel like life can be a lot the older you get. And whether it is your body giving up in different ways, or it is life gets getting more complicated, or trying to find time for yourself and your hobbies. And I think that this is your phone trying to suck all of the attention out of you, and then it feels good, but you're depleted. And I think this feeling of, okay, what is it that actually keeps me going? Where do I can find joy in this whole whirlwind of mess, of information, of worries, of people, of desires that are mine or they are constructed by the reality I perceive on my phone. Like, where am I in all of this? And what is actually something that makes me feel better? And this is for me where expression and creativity came in. I want to be able to talk about it. I want to be able to. Some people make crafts, like they make ceramics and all of these things, because you actually make something and you see it and it's there and it's yours. And the feeling of that in a world where so many people are creating, I don't know, presentations, and your work does not give you sometimes the value of what did I create, that makes you want to make a podcast, because then it's out there
Yeah.
and you see it and you're like, okay, at the end of the day, I'm making this, or I'm making that, or I made a cup, or I made a person smile at the metro because I was mindful to be like, hey, I can make someone's day. What I mean with this is it's a weird thing to try and identify things that make you keep going. But once you have that, that's a good neural pathway to kind of shape, because the way we think shapes who we are. And the more you think in a certain way, it becomes more real. And I think it's very difficult to force your, like people, some people, like, I don't want this forced positivity. And it makes sense. But what you feed your brain, and this is your thoughts, it also shapes who you are. So if you find value in understanding what drives you, spend a little bit of time there, see what you find, maybe try a few things out, go to a drawing class that exists no matter where you live in the world. Hopefully, if you're in a city center, there's so many things going out there. So I would just say, yeah, find what moves you and try to keep that alive in one way or another in the chaos of life.
Wow, that was so much deeper than anything I could have expected. I was like, there's going to be something about, well, I went back to the podcasting, I guess, but here I am,
Yes.
this was way deeper of a nugget of information than I could have
It
expected.
comes from a thought, and I stop with this. Listen to yet another expat, and there's an episode that is titled Joy is Resistance. And I really, really believe in that line. I heard it actually at a stand-up comedy I went from a therapist that was asked, wow, everything is bleak. What do you tell to your people? And I find so much value in that line. I do think that joy is resistance, and I do think that finding joy is not easy, because there's all the perceived joy of media that takes a lot but gives very little back. So, yeah, that part for me is important. And I think even if people don't recognize it, I think it's important for everyone.
Wow. Thank you for plugging yourself. I would have done it for you otherwise. Joyous Resistance will be linked at least to the YouTube version of this this podcast. If you're on any of the other platforms that Ermis is on as well, look up Yet Another Expat. I know on YouTube you're actually found under your actual name, Ermis Zacharopoulos. I will link that as well. On Spotify and other podcasts, are you found as
Yet another expat is the main Spotify one. Then Instagram, I have an account, but I don't have time. Like, you will, if you Google it, you will find my personal profile. I have a one for the podcast, but I'm not so good at keeping it up. But maybe me and Seb get someone to help us out in our podcast
exactly?
management,
We
and
need
then I
an
solve
intern.
that. I'm trying to
Yeah.
convince him.
If someone wants to poach you as the AI expert for people, or if someone just wants to pick your brain, how do they find you?
Hit me up on LinkedIn, hit me up on Instagram. I think these are the two places I spent more time. It's sad, but it's true. So yes, if you feel more professional and you want some consulting, come on LinkedIn. Yeah, if you enjoy the podcast and want to ask any questions there, come on Instagram.
And with that said, check out Yet Another Expat and check Ermis Zacharopoulos out on LinkedIn.
Nice.
Hey, you made it to the end of the episode. Before you leave, can you please do me this one simple favor and subscribe to the podcast? It's your free and easy way to show your support for all the hard work we put into every single episode, as well as help us reach more people and get new guests onto the show. Thank you for listening to the Untold Paths podcast.